I thought signing my divorce papers would be the most painful moment of my life. I was wrong. 9 months later, one unexpected visitor would force me to question everything I believed about love, family, and fatherhood. But to understand that day, you first have to understand us. My name is Kelechi Nwosu. I was 39 years old, born and raised in Enugu, Nigeria, before building my career in Lagos. Everything started on a rainy Thursday afternoon. A friend convinced me to attend a small entrepreneurship seminar in Victoria Island. I almost stayed home. I had only enough money for transportation and a cheap lunch. Buying a networking ticket felt irresponsible. My friend insisted. You never know which room contains your future. He was right. During the lunch break, I accidentally bumped into a woman carrying 2 cups of coffee. One cup landed on my white shirt. The other spilled onto the floor. She looked horrified. "I'm so sorry," she said. Her voice trembled more than mine. I laughed before she could apologize again. It was my only white shirt. She covered her face and laughed. "I'll buy you another one." I shook my head. "Only if you let me replace your coffee first." That was how I met Amara Okeke. She was intelligent, confident, without being arrogant, beautiful, without trying to attract attention. She worked as a financial analyst for a growing investment company. Unlike many people I met, she never asked how much money I earned. She asked what problem I wanted to solve. When I explained my dream of creating software that could modernize freight transportation across Africa, she listened without interrupting. Most people politely changed the subject whenever I described my business ideas. Amara asked questions, real questions, questions that made me think harder. Before we left the seminar, we exchanged phone numbers. I remember walking toward the bus stop with a smile I could not hide. For the first time in months, the future felt exciting. Our first date cost less than $20. We ate spicy grilled fish at a small restaurant overlooking the Lagos Lagoon. The chairs were old. The tables leaned slightly. The waiter forgot our drinks twice. Neither of us cared. We talked until the owner politely reminded us he wanted to close for the night. Weeks turned into months. Our relationship grew naturally. She celebrated every small business contract I won. I encouraged her whenever work became stressful. When my laptop failed 2 days before an important client presentation, she quietly used part of her savings to help me buy another one. She never mentioned it again. That act stayed with me forever. Eventually, I introduced her to my parents. My mother welcomed her with a warm embrace. After dinner, she called me outside while Amara helped wash the dishes. She looked toward the evening sky before speaking. "Kelechi," she said softly, "never marry someone because they believe in your success." I frowned. She smiled. "Marry the woman who believes in your character when success hasn't arrived yet." I looked through the kitchen window. Amara was laughing with my mother. At that moment, I believed I had found exactly that woman. A year later, I asked her to marry me. There was no luxury resort, no orchestra, no photographers hiding behind trees, only a quiet beach at sunset, a simple ring, a nervous heartbeat, and one sincere question. She cried before saying yes. Our wedding reflected who we were. Simple, elegant, filled with family instead of extravagance. Children chased one another through the garden. Our relatives danced until sunset. My father welcomed every guest personally. Before the ceremony began, my mother held both our hands. She smiled with tears in her eyes. Then she whispered words I would remember for the rest of my life. Protect each other's peace, because storms always arrive where love lives. At the time, neither of us understood just how powerful that advice would become. We believed our greatest days were still ahead of us, and for a while, they truly were. Marriage did not change our dreams. It gave them a shared purpose. Every morning, Amara left for her office before sunrise. I stayed behind, surrounded by whiteboards covered with software ideas, delivery routes, and financial projections. Our apartment was small. The living room also served as my office. The dining table became my conference room whenever clients visited. We laughed about it. Whenever an important meeting ended, Amara would tease me. "One day, you'll have a real office." I always smiled. "One day, we'll build it together." Life was far from luxurious. Some months we celebrated new contracts. Other months we counted every naira before grocery shopping. There were evenings when we shared one meal instead of two because we were saving every possible coin. Neither of us complained. We believed sacrifice was temporary. My mother visited often. She never brought expensive gifts. She always arrived carrying homemade food and quiet wisdom. Before leaving, she repeated the same words. "Never measure a marriage by comfort. Measure it by how both people carry hardship together." For years, we tried to live exactly that way. Slowly, my company began attracting attention. Small transport businesses started using my logistics software. A warehouse owner referred another client, then another. The progress was steady rather than spectacular. Each victory felt earned. Amara remained my biggest supporter. She reviewed business proposals late at night. She corrected spelling mistakes before investor meetings. She even practiced presentations with me until midnight. Whenever I doubted myself, she reminded me why I started. "I believe in you," she often said. "I just hope one day you believe in yourself the way I do." Those words carried me through difficult seasons. Then we decided it was time to grow our family. We imagined a little boy running through our home. Sometimes we imagined a daughter with her mother's smile. We argued playfully over baby names during long drives across Lagos. Those conversations became our favorite escape. Months passed. Nothing happened. We convinced ourselves not to worry. Another year passed. Still nothing. Eventually, our doctor recommended fertility testing. Neither of us expected bad news. The examination results arrived on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. The doctor spoke gently. Natural conception would be extremely difficult. Not impossible, but unlikely. The silence inside that consultation room weighed more than any words. On the drive home, neither of us turned on the radio. Rain tapped against the windshield like unanswered prayers. That night, Amara cried herself to sleep beside me. I pretended to be asleep because I didn't know how to comfort her. The following months became a cycle of appointments. Blood tests, hormone treatments, medical procedures, hope, then disappointment. Again and again, every failed attempt stole a small piece of our joy. Friends announced pregnancies. Family members innocently asked when we planned to have children. Each question felt like salt pressed into an invisible wound. Still, we refused to give up. We began in vitro fertilization. The treatment demanded more than money. It demanded patience, strength, faith. Amara endured injections that left bruises on her skin. She smiled through pain I knew I could never fully understand. Watching her suffer broke something inside me. One evening, after another difficult appointment, we sat together on our apartment balcony. The city lights shimmered beneath the night sky. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally, she rested her head against my shoulder. "What if we're never parents?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. I held her hand tightly. "Then we'll still have each other." She smiled through tears. "I hope that's always enough." I believed it would be. But life has a way of testing promises before rewarding them. Months later, our final IVF cycle produced only one healthy embryo. The doctor explained that it represented our best chance. We celebrated carefully. Not because success was guaranteed, because hope had finally returned. Then everything else began falling apart. My biggest client unexpectedly cancelled a long-term contract. Cash flow disappeared almost overnight. Employee salaries became difficult to pay. Investors who once praised my vision suddenly stopped answering my calls. At the same time, Amara accepted a promotion that required longer hours and frequent travel. We started missing dinner together. Small conversations became rushed phone calls. Stress replaced laughter. Exhaustion replaced affection. The embryo remained safely frozen while we agreed to postpone implantation until our lives became stable again. We thought we were protecting our future. We had no idea that decision would eventually become the center of a storm, capable of destroying everything we believed about each other. And the first crack in our marriage was only days away. The first crack in our marriage didn't sound like shouting. It sounded like silence. Amara returned from another business trip just after sunset. She looked exhausted. Her suitcase remained beside the front door for almost an hour. Normally, she would tell me stories about the people she met or the cities she visited. That evening, she barely spoke. I convinced myself it was only work. I wanted to believe difficult seasons eventually passed. My mother used to say, "Storms reveal whether two people are pulling the same boat or rowing in opposite directions." I remembered those words every time another quiet dinner ended without conversation. Weeks became months. Our schedules no longer belonged to us. She left before sunrise. I returned long after dark. Sometimes we shared the same house without truly seeing each other. When we did speak, every conversation somehow became about money. The company needed another investor. The company needed another loan. The company needed more time. I hated asking for patience. She hated living with uncertainty. Neither of us realized fear was slowly replacing trust. Then disaster arrived all at once. A software update failed during the largest logistics contract my company had ever signed. Hundreds of deliveries stopped across 3 states. Customers demanded refunds. Investors threatened legal action. Within 48 hours, I lost nearly everything I had spent 7 years building. My office became painfully quiet. Employees packed their desks. Some cried. Others avoided looking at me. I stood alone after everyone left, staring at empty chairs that only days earlier had been filled with dreams. Driving home that evening felt heavier than carrying the entire company on my shoulders. I hoped Amara would simply hug me. Instead, she was sitting at the dining table, with unpaid bills spread across the surface. She looked up without smiling. "How bad is it?" I told her the truth. "We might lose the business. We might lose the apartment. We might even lose the savings we had protected for years." She closed her eyes. Neither of us spoke. That silence hurt more than any argument. The following weeks became unbearable. Collection agencies called constantly. Banks rejected every restructuring proposal. Suppliers demanded immediate payment. Friends stopped answering my messages. People who once praised my vision suddenly acted as though they had never known me. Then one afternoon, I returned home earlier than expected. Amara was sitting on the balcony. She quickly closed her laptop when she heard the door. I thought nothing of it, until a message flashed across her phone. The screen lit up for only a second, but I recognized the sender's name. Tunde Balogun, my former business partner. The man helping investors negotiate the sale of my collapsing company. Before I could ask anything, she picked up the phone. "It's work," she said quietly. I wanted to believe her. Instead, doubt planted its first seed. Over the next several days, I noticed more changes. She stepped outside whenever her phone rang. She deleted conversations. She stayed later at the office. Each explanation sounded reasonable. Yet together, they formed a picture I couldn't ignore. One evening, I finally asked, "Are you hiding something from me?" She looked hurt. "No." "Then why are you talking to Tunde?" She hesitated. Only for a second. But sometimes 1 second is enough to change a marriage forever. "He contacted me about financial advice." I frowned. "Financial advice?" "He wanted to understand our company's situation." "Our company?" She lowered her eyes. I thought maybe I could help. Those words landed like stones inside my chest. Without telling me, she had been discussing my collapsing business with the very man who had begun competing against me months earlier. Whether her intentions were innocent no longer mattered. Trust had already been damaged. Arguments became frequent. Small disagreements became personal attacks. Sleep disappeared. Laughter disappeared. Hope disappeared. Our fertility treatment became impossible to continue. Together, we visited the clinic one final time. The doctor explained our remaining embryo would stay safely frozen until both of us decided otherwise. Neither of us had the strength to discuss children anymore. As we walked toward the parking lot, Amara suddenly stopped. Tears filled her eyes. I don't recognize us anymore. Neither did I. 3 months later, divorce papers arrived. I stared at the envelope for almost an hour before opening it. Every page felt heavier than the last. The woman who once believed in my dreams now wanted to leave the life we had promised to build together. I signed because I had nothing left to fight with. The court awarded her our apartment and part of the remaining assets. She walked away carrying memories I believed would never heal. I walked away carrying only one suitcase, my mother's old Bible, and the painful belief that I had failed both as a husband and as a man. I thought my story had ended. I didn't know it was only preparing me for the greatest opportunity of my life. That was the exact moment I realized nothing would ever be the same again. I left the courthouse with one suitcase and nowhere that truly felt like home. The city looked exactly the same. I didn't. For weeks, I barely recognized the man staring back at me in the mirror. The divorce had taken more than my marriage. It had taken my confidence. It had taken the company I had spent years building. It had taken the future I had imagined every night before falling asleep. I rented a small one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Lagos. The walls were bare. The furniture was second-hand. When rain fell, water leaked through one corner of the ceiling. It wasn't the life I had dreamed about, but it was honest. Every morning I woke before sunrise. Not because I had somewhere important to be, because I refused to let despair become my routine. One afternoon my mother arrived carrying 2 bags of food. She looked around the apartment without saying a word. Then she placed the bags on the kitchen counter. "You've lost many things," she said, "but don't lose yourself." I smiled weakly. "I don't even know where to begin again." She gently placed her hand on my shoulder. "God can rebuild a faithful heart faster than a proud man can rebuild his fortune." Those words stayed with me long after she left. The following week, I began searching for work. I visited company after company. Most rejected me. Some recognized my name. They remembered the headlines about my failed business. They smiled politely before saying they had already filled the position. One manager didn't even hide his opinion. "If you couldn't save your own company," he said, "why should I trust you with mine?" His words followed me home. That night I almost gave up. Almost. The next morning I received an unexpected phone call. The caller introduced himself as Chief Emeka Adeyemi. Years earlier, I had designed a simple inventory system for one of his warehouses. I barely remembered the project. He remembered everything. "I heard what happened," he said. "I don't care about newspaper headlines. I care about character." He invited me to visit one of his logistics centers. The warehouse was old. Forklifts broke down regularly. Shipments were tracked with paper files. Workers spent hours searching for missing inventory. As I walked through the building, I saw problems everywhere. But I also saw possibilities. Chief Emeka noticed the look in my eyes. "What are you thinking?" I smiled for the first time in months. "I think this place can become one of the most efficient warehouses in West Africa." He laughed. "Good. Then prove it." He offered me a consulting contract. Not ownership, not a partnership, just one opportunity. It wasn't glamorous, but it was enough. For the next 6 months, I worked harder than I ever had before. I arrived before every employee. I often left after everyone else. I redesigned their inventory systems, introduced digital tracking, optimized delivery routes, reduced wasted fuel, eliminated unnecessary paperwork. The improvements were slow, painfully slow. Some workers resisted every change. Others openly mocked my ideas. "The failed businessman has come to teach us success," one supervisor joked. I answered with results instead of arguments. Little by little, the numbers began changing. Delivery times improved. Customer complaints dropped. Operating costs decreased. Chief Emeka noticed. Then other business owners noticed. Soon I was consulting for 2 companies, then 5, then 12. Every contract taught me something new. Every mistake made me stronger. I stopped chasing quick success. I focused on creating lasting value. Years passed. Quietly, patiently. One evening, Chief Emeka invited me to dinner. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were investment proposals from international firms. "I've watched you rebuild your life," he said. "I believe it's time you build something that belongs entirely to you." Together we founded a logistics technology platform designed specifically for African supply chains. Unlike my first company, this one grew carefully. No reckless expansion, no unnecessary debt. Every decision required discipline. Every partnership required trust. Within 4 years, our software operated in more than 15 countries. Global investors began calling. Not because we chased them, because they chased us. Eventually, one investment group offered to purchase 40% of the company. The agreement valued the business at hundreds of millions of dollars. When the transaction finally closed, $300 million entered my accounts. Reporters called it an overnight success. I smiled every time I heard that phrase. They hadn't seen the lonely apartment, the rejection letters, the sleepless nights, or the years required to rebuild one broken life. I believed the hardest chapter was finally behind me. I was wrong. Because 3 days after the sale became public, someone from my past arrived, carrying a secret that would change everything. 3 days after the sale became public, every television station seemed to know my name. Business magazines called me Africa's newest technology success story. People who had ignored my emails for years suddenly wanted meetings. Former competitors praised my vision. Strangers asked for photographs. Success attracted attention, but it also awakened ghosts. That Monday morning began like every other. I arrived at headquarters before most of my employees. The building overlooked the Lagos skyline. Glass walls reflected the sunrise. Inside, hundreds of people were already working to move goods across Africa through software we had built with patience instead of shortcuts. Sometimes I stood quietly in the lobby before taking the elevator. Not because I admired the building, because I remembered the tiny apartment where rebuilding had started. My mother's words echoed in my mind. Never let success make you forget the road that carried you there. I repeated them every morning. At exactly 9 o'clock, my assistant entered my office. "Sir." She looked unusually nervous. "There's a woman downstairs asking to see you. I have appointments all day." "I know, but she says she used to be your wife." The room suddenly felt smaller. I slowly placed my pen on the desk. "What's her name?" "Amara." For several seconds, I didn't answer. 3 years. 3 years without seeing her. 3 years without hearing her voice. I had imagined this moment many times. Sometimes I imagined anger. Sometimes satisfaction. Sometimes complete indifference. None of those emotions appeared. Only curiosity. I asked security to bring her to a private conference room. 5 minutes later, I opened the door. Time had changed both of us. She looked older. Not because of age, because of life. Her face carried the quiet exhaustion of someone who hadn't slept peacefully for months. Then my eyes moved lower. She was heavily pregnant. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. She slowly stood. Neither of us spoke. The silence lasted several seconds. Finally, she whispered, "Hello, Kelechi." I nodded politely. "Hello, Amara." She looked around the conference room. "I never imagined this would be your office. I never imagined we'd meet again." Her eyes filled with tears. Neither compliment nor apology mattered anymore. I noticed she kept both hands protectively around her stomach. Something was deeply wrong. She reached into her handbag and removed a large brown envelope. "I know how this looks. You probably think I came because of your money. I didn't." She carefully placed the envelope on the table between us. "I came because I don't know who else to trust." I didn't touch it. "What do you want, Amara?" She looked directly into my eyes. Then she said the sentence that shattered every expectation I had. "I'm carrying your child." The words echoed through the room. I stared at her in complete disbelief. "No," she swallowed. "I know exactly what you're thinking. It isn't possible." That's what I thought too. I stood immediately. Our divorce was finalized 3 years ago. We haven't been together since before then. I know. Then explain. Instead of answering, she slowly opened the envelope. Inside were medical reports. ultrasound images, laboratory records, and one document bearing the logo of the fertility clinic we had visited during our marriage. The same clinic where our final embryo had been frozen. My heart began pounding. I picked up the first page. The embryo identification number looked familiar. Very familiar. I turned another page. The implantation date. 8 months earlier. My name appeared beneath the authorization section. My signature appeared beside it. Except, it wasn't my signature. It looked almost identical. But one small detail was wrong. I always finished my surname with an upward stroke. This signature ended downward. Someone had copied my handwriting. Very carefully. Very professionally. I looked back at Amara. I never signed this. She slowly nodded. I believe you now. Those 4 words changed everything. She explained that after the procedure, the clinic assured her both legal approvals had already been received. She believed I had changed my mind without wanting to see her again. She assumed I wanted the child but not the marriage. For months, she accepted anonymous payments covering every medical expense. Someone even paid her rent. She thought it was me. I had never sent a single payment. Then, 3 weeks earlier, everything changed. The money stopped arriving. Unknown people began following her. Her apartment was searched while she was at work. Nothing expensive disappeared. Only documents connected to the pregnancy. Yesterday, someone left a handwritten note beneath her apartment door. She removed the folded paper from her purse. My hands tightened as I opened it. Only one sentence was written. Bring us the original embryo records before the child is born. No name. No signature. Nothing else. I looked back at Amara. Fear had replaced every trace of pride in her face. She wasn't asking for my fortune. She was asking for protection. Before either of us could speak again, my head of security burst into the conference room without knocking. Sir. He rarely sounded alarmed. This time he did. He placed a small electronic device on the table. We found this underneath her car. A military-grade GPS tracker. The room fell silent. Then he looked directly at me. They didn't just follow her here. They wanted us to find her. Just as those words left his mouth, every screen inside the conference room suddenly switched to the live security cameras. A convoy of 3 black SUVs had entered the front gates. The lead vehicle stopped directly outside the building. Several men stepped out wearing dark business suits. One of them carried a silver medical case. Amara's face turned completely pale. She grabbed my arm. I know that man. My heartbeat stopped. He was in the operating room the day they implanted the embryo. The convoy stopped in front of the headquarters. Nobody stepped inside immediately. They were waiting, watching, calculating. My security team sealed every entrance while employees were quietly escorted to secure floors. Amara stood beside me, holding her stomach with both hands. For the first time since she arrived, I realized she wasn't acting. She was terrified. My mother's voice echoed inside my mind. Truth never fears time, lies always do. I looked at Amara. If we're going to survive this, there can be no more secrets. She nodded slowly. There aren't. I believed her. For the first time in years, I truly believed her. Just then, Sade Okafor arrived with 2 investigators from our corporate security division. They immediately began examining every document Amara had brought. Within minutes, one investigator stopped turning pages. These signatures are forged. I wasn't surprised. What about the clinic stamps? They're genuine. The room became silent. Someone inside the fertility clinic had helped whoever planned this. Sade immediately contacted the clinic director. At first, he denied everything. Then she mentioned the forged authorization. His confidence disappeared. An emergency audit began that same afternoon. 3 hours later, the clinic called back. Their internal records had been altered. Someone with administrator access had entered the system 8 months earlier. The authorization files had been replaced. Security footage from that day had also disappeared. It wasn't an accident. It was a carefully planned operation. Then another discovery changed everything. One of the investigators traced every anonymous payment made to Amara. The money had passed through several charitable foundations before reaching her account. Each company hid the next. Eventually, the trail ended at a private investment firm. Its majority shareholder shocked everyone in the room. Tunde Balogun. I closed my eyes. After all these years, it was him. Sade immediately requested a financial injunction. Within hours, investigators obtained warrants to search several offices connected to Tunde's companies. They discovered far more than anyone expected. Hidden servers, forged contracts, false identities, and confidential fertility records belonging to dozens of wealthy couples. The embryo program had become a criminal business. Unused embryos were secretly traded, transferred, and manipulated through forged legal documents. Children had become assets. Families had become transactions. My stomach turned. Then investigators uncovered the final piece. Tunde hadn't wanted the baby. He wanted me. The forged pregnancy was never designed to steal child support. It was designed to force me into a public scandal immediately after my company became worth hundreds of millions. If I accepted the child without questions, investors would begin investigating my personal life. If I denied the child publicly, the media would destroy my reputation. Either way, the company would lose billions in market value. Someone else could buy controlling shares at a fraction of their value. It had never been about family. It had always been about business. Then Sade received another phone call. Police had arrested Tunde while he was attempting to leave the country. Inside his private office, they found one final folder. Its title read, Project Phoenix. Inside was every stage of the plan. My divorce, the attack on my first company, the forged embryo authorization, the anonymous payments, the surveillance, even the GPS tracker beneath Amara's car. Everything had been coordinated for years. I looked toward Amara. She had tears streaming down her face. I blamed you. Her voice broke. I thought you abandoned me. Again. I gently shook my head. And I believed you betrayed me. Neither of us spoke for several moments. Years of pain disappeared beneath one simple truth. We had both been manipulated. Neither of us had truly understood what happened after our marriage collapsed. My mother arrived later that evening after hearing the news. She hugged Amara first. Then she hugged me. She looked at both of us before smiling gently. Forgiveness does not erase yesterday. It frees tomorrow. Those words settled quietly inside my heart. For years, I believed healing meant proving someone wrong. Now I understood something different. Healing begins the moment you stop carrying hatred that belongs to someone else. A week later, independent DNA results finally arrived. My hands trembled as I opened the report. I looked only at the final line. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. I closed my eyes. The child was mine. The little life growing inside Amara had been created from the embryo we had once prayed over together. Not by betrayal, not by an affair, but by a crime neither of us knew had happened. At that moment, I wasn't thinking about the $300 million. I wasn't thinking about headlines. I wasn't thinking about Tunde. I was thinking about becoming a father. The dream we thought had died years earlier had survived in the most unexpected way. And this time, I wasn't going to let anyone steal my family again. Exactly 1 year later, I stood in the same place where my life had almost changed forever. The entrance of my headquarters. The glass walls reflected the morning sun exactly as they had on the day Amara arrived, carrying that impossible truth. Only this time, I wasn't waiting for fear. I was waiting for my family. A black SUV stopped in front of the building. The rear door opened. Amara stepped out with a peaceful smile I hadn't seen in years. In her arms was our son, little Chinonso. His name means God is near. My mother chose it. She said no other name could better describe the miracle we had survived. As I lifted him into my arms, he wrapped his tiny fingers around mine. In that moment, every business award, every headline, every dollar felt insignificant. The greatest blessing of my life wasn't waiting inside my bank account. It was looking back at me with curious little eyes. The investigation into Project Phoenix continued for months. More arrests followed. Doctors lost their medical licenses. Lawyers who helped forge documents were disbarred. Executives who financed the operation faced criminal charges. Several families discovered they had also been victims. Some were reunited with children they thought they had lost forever. Others finally learned the truth after years of confusion. Justice arrived slowly, but it arrived. As for Tunde Balogun, he eventually stood before the court, where every piece of evidence was presented. The forged signatures, the stolen medical records, the financial transactions, the surveillance operations. He looked older than I remembered. Not because of prison, because lies always become heavier than the people carrying them. When the judge asked whether I wished to address him, the courtroom became silent. Everyone expected anger. Some expected revenge. Instead, I stood quietly. I looked at the man who had stolen my company, destroyed my marriage, manipulated innocent families, and tried to destroy my future. Then, I spoke only one sentence. I refuse to let your choices decide the kind of man I become. I sat down. Nothing more needed to be said. As we walked out of the courtroom, Amara slipped her hand into mine. Neither of us smiled immediately. Healing had taken time. Trust had taken even longer. We did not pretend the past never happened. We simply refused to live inside it anymore. Months later, we established the Nwosu Family Foundation. Not to celebrate wealth, to protect families. The foundation provided legal assistance for couples facing fertility fraud. It funded ethical reproductive health care across several African countries. It also offered scholarships for children who had lost parents through medical corruption. Every family we helped reminded us why we survived. Success finally had a purpose greater than ourselves. One afternoon, my mother visited our home. She watched Chinonso taking his first unsteady steps across the garden. Then she smiled. She looked at me the same way she had years earlier when I was just a young dreamer. Kelechi, she gently placed her hand on my shoulder. Character is still the only wealth nobody can steal from you. Those were the exact words she had spoken throughout my childhood. Back then, I thought she was teaching me how to become successful. Now I understood. She had been teaching me how to remain human after success arrived. Sometimes people ask whether Amara and I regret everything that happened. The answer surprises them. We regret the pain. We regret the years we lost. But we do not regret the lessons, because broken people can become wiser people if they choose healing over bitterness. Our marriage today is different from the first one, not because it is perfect, because it is honest. Every difficult conversation is faced together. Every victory is celebrated together. Every challenge reminds us that trust must be protected every single day. Whenever I enter my headquarters now, I often pause for a moment beside the front entrance. It's the exact place where my pregnant ex-wife once stood, believing I would reject her forever. That same place now welcomes my wife and our son almost every Friday for lunch. The location never changed. The meaning changed completely. And perhaps that is what life is really about. Not escaping painful places, but allowing God to transform them into places of peace. If someone watching this has been betrayed, don't let betrayal become your identity. If you've lost everything, remember that losing possessions is not the same as losing your purpose. And if life gives you another opportunity to choose forgiveness, choose it. Not because the other person deserves it, because your heart deserves freedom. True wealth is not measured by the money you accumulate. It is measured by the peace you protect, the family you cherish, and the character you refuse to compromise.